Hello, everybody. My name is Shandukani Nthai. I am the CEO and founder of African Nova Solutions. We are a data consultancy and disruptive tech solution company based here in Johannesburg, South Africa. And this is my story. So a while back, I actually had the privilege to participate in the MIT machine learning program just to get a deeper understanding of machine learning and its implications, more specifically its business implications. And through this program, I actually got the chance to play around with my first facial recognition tool. And these were some of the results. So according to this particular tool, it identified me as a pretty joyful person, which I feel is pretty accurate. But what really stood out for me with this particular tool was the fact that it had the ability to actually identify me as a human being. So it picked up on my head, my skin, my lips, my black hair, my nose. But what really impressed me was the fact that it picked up on the fact that I was actually wearing a lace front wig in this particular photo. So which was very interesting and which was extremely accurate. So, and it just really comes to show how fast and how innovative technology is getting. And that's just some of the code associated with the particular tool. So this whole exercise for me was really interesting, but to be very honest with you, I didn't really dwell on the results of this exercise because, to be very honest with everyone, I was just more concerned with handing in my assignments in on time and actually finishing the program. But later on the program, I actually had the opportunity again to attend a lecture on the applications of machine learning, more specifically the applications of machine learning in the American criminal justice system. And we spoke about how law enforcement agencies are using tools like the one that I just previously showed you, more facial recognition tool systems to help identify suspects. We also spoke about how machine learning algorithms are being used, by law firms to even predict a judge's verdict. So this was very interesting for me to just see the increase of the use and the deployment of these technologies, which was really inspiring and really got me thinking. But after that, I began to think a bit deeper about the American criminal justice system in itself and the many issues in which plague the system, like, for example, the disproportionate amount of African American men in which make up the American prison population, or the fact that African Americans are receiving harsher sentences in comparison to their white counterparts. And this also brought up a red flag for me because I then thought, okay, so now they are increasing the use of these type of technologies and basically leaving it up, creating a scenario where these technologies are ultimately defining and determining a person's life, if they get incarcerated, and just has the power to make a whole wide range of life-changing decisions. But also, most importantly, are these tools and technologies in which are being released actually, what are the pitfalls? Are they bulletproof? Are they fair? Are they non-biased? So these are the type of questions that came up in my mind at the time. So it was at this very same moment then I decided to ask good old Google a very simple question: can algorithms be biased? Which threw me into the world of algorithmic bias. Since the advent of computing, big data and machine learning algorithms have proven to infiltrate and influence every aspect of our social and economic lives. These new data-driven systems have proven to hold tremendous potential to bring about tangible change and to empower communities all around the world, while holding game-changing promises to do things like improve efficiency, bring down costs, and accelerate research and development efforts. Tools like AI, as you know, are being used to screen job candidates, to assist in diagnosing diseases, to help identify criminal suspects, and to achieve a whole wide range of innovation and technical advancement. So what is algorithmic bias, actually? So algorithmic bias can be best described as the lack of fairness that emerges from the output of a computer system, or in this particular case, from an algorithm. This lack of fairness can be summarized as a discrimination of one group based on special categorical distinction made by an algorithm. Algorithmic bias can take several forms, such as racial bias, age discrimination, and gender bias. Now, the most important thing to highlight and acknowledge when understanding and unpacking algorithmic bias is the fact that these algorithms are made by people. More than often white males, as the tech industry still remains a male-dominated industry. Now, I'm only mentioning this not to slander my white male colleagues within the tech industry, but to highlight the fact that these are the creators of these systems. And these are the systems in which carry and continue to perpetuate bias, whether that bias is conscious or unconscious. And it is this inherent bias in which is often reflected in algorithms in which they create. This inherent bias is also coupled with the fact that most AI algorithms are used and made using historical data. And because we are using historical data to train these models, we are ultimately training AI models to perpetuate dangerous biases within our societies, biases in which have real-life implications. With unemployment being at a record high at 32.6% in South Africa, and AI algorithms increasingly being used throughout the hiring process, it can be argued that AI algorithms are now serving as gatekeepers for current jobs. For example, HireVue. HireVue is an HR facial recognition technology in which I've personally experienced myself. Through a video interview, the technology is able to pick up on verbal and non-verbal cues in order to determine a number of factors, like the emotional intelligence or the problem-solving style and skill of a potential candidate. A candidate is then given a score out of 100, and it is this score that is then used to decide if a candidate has received the job or if they can actually even continue to the next second round of interviews. Notably, these models are trained on current top performers of the company, i.e. the historical data of the company and its top performers. Now, in theory, this sounds like an amazing piece of technology, as it will undoubtedly accelerate, optimize, and assist the hiring efforts of any company. It also presents the company with the best candidates in which are in line with the company and its culture. However, in practice, this type of technology or software is not sustainable and can be discriminatory and biased, and does have a large amount of pitfalls, especially in a South African and African context, where access to the internet alone is a problem, let alone access to the resources in which are needed to properly engage with such a software. Softwares and technologies like HireVue are ultimately allowing for algorithms to determine one's fate, creating a scenario where people can get a low score based off due to uncontrollable factors. For example, pure lighting, bad connection, or to go even a bit deeper, even the person's skin tone. A person's skin tone can even can undoubtedly prevent a person's ability to get a high score through the technology's inability to accurately pick up on those vital verbal and non-verbal cues. And it's only just recently that facial recognition tools are only starting to better detect darker skin-toned individuals. Another contributing factor that can contribute to someone scoring low is the inability for the technology to actually pick up someone's tone, diction, and accent, which ultimately further hinders their ability to obtain a higher score. So for example, South Africa has 11 official languages. English is the only language that offers sufficient data quantitatively and qualitatively due to the historical conditions in South Africa and global priorities. The written history of English stretches back centuries, and it has a comparable wealth of historical data compared to other South African languages in which do not have the same amount of data. Now let's use natural language processing, for example. Natural language processing, a subdiscipline of machine learning, seeks to interpret manipulate, and potentially generate human language, and in this particular case can be used for transcription purposes. So assuming that HireView uses natural language processes within their software, natural language programming utilizes what is known as a corpus. A corpus is a large body of words and stories which can be used to train models to interpret meaning and pick up on emotion. For the English language, this is not, and for the English language and for English speakers, this is not a problem at all, because there is a significantly large amount of data readily available in which is needed to train these models. But for a large quantity and number of other South African language, this is not the case. There's not a large amount of data or a large comparable corpus of material that a model can use that can be used to train a model from, placing non-English speakers at a disadvantage. All of these factors are ultimately creating a negative scenario whereby highly skilled and highly qualified candidates are not even given the opportunity for a second interview or even the job because of the inability and the pitfalls of a technology in which cannot pick on the vital verbal and non-verbal cues because of a person's accent or even skin tone. Another example that cannot be ignored is Amazon. Amazon is another great example of the presence of algorithmic bias in a company that has a huge amount of data and experience with machine learning algorithms. According to Retuitors, Amazon recently scrapped an internal project that was trying to use AI to vet job applicants, but later scrapped it after the software consistently downgraded female candidates. Now, the team behind the project reported that the intention was just to simply speed up the hiring process by creating a technology in which could take up to 100 resumes and spit out the top 5, and it would be these top 5 candidates in which eventually would be hired. Now, going back to the idea and concept of historical data being used in order to train these models. Because AI systems learn to make decisions by looking at data, more specifically historical data, they then often perpetuate existing biases. So in this particular example, the biases that is constantly being perpetuated is the bias in which already exists within the male-dominated working tech environment. Because this algorithm was made by males who have experience within the tech space, it was not even trained to even pick up on the experience of female candidates. And it was later revealed that the program even went to as far as to penalize and not even recognize women and women applicants, because it was tending out to not pick up on cues such as women who attended all women's colleges, as well as resumes that contain the words women's tech society, for example, therefore being biased towards anything that is male related in this particular context. So what is the way forward? So the question now is, why should gender, race, and social class be important to all and in this particular context? Especially in an industry that at face value is created specifically to remove the human bias from the equation and to a certain extent eradicate human bias. Quite simply, this conversation is important because a lack of diversity and a lack of consideration of all these factors ultimately stifles innovation, holds back progress, and leads to the development of poorer technologies in which have an immense amount of pitfalls. To address this imbalance, we need to create an industry that provides an inclusive pipeline of talent at every level throughout the innovation timeline. It also means looking to finding ways to adopt a culture of inclusive coding, which consists of creating a full spectrum team with diverse individuals who can check each other's blind spots. It also includes building platforms in which can actually identify bias. It also means creating auditing softwares and auditing existing softwares as they speak, as they are running and collecting all this various data. It also means creating more inclusive data training sets. But most importantly, moving forward, the biggest factor that needs to be considered moving forward is that members and leaders of the tech industry need to think more consciously about the social impact of the technology in which we are developing. So in the words of Peter Parker from Spider-Man, with power comes great responsibility. We, the people, have a responsibility to think about the social impact in which the technology in which we create and develop might have on the world. Are we truly going into a world where we're going to say it's okay to continue to perpetuate certain biases in which we have seen have real life consequences on people's lives? Or are we going to stop and take a moment to consciously think about the technologies in which we put out there? We are essentially the component of the most important component of the overall solution. And the solution starts with us. In order to live in a world where unbiased algorithms do not matter and they do not drive our progress and our tech innovation. Thank you so much. So I just wanted to open the floor for any questions that people might have. I'm really excited to hear your questions.